Right. So, Brandon, you brought this up in our chat the other day, or yesterday actually, to bring up with the show. And surprisingly, not a lot of people have talked about this story. So I was really surprised to not hear it from very many outlets. But the Grizzlies could invoke an early termination clause unless Memphis's Shelby County pays for the attendance shortfall. This whole article is from Evan Barnes of the Memphis Commercial Appeal. So an agreement that kicked in this season that Shelby County and Memphis will have to purchase the required number of suites or season tickets to cure the regular season shortfall. Of course, this is partially due to COVID-19, but it's also due to the short or small attendance in Memphis. Normally they get 15,857 fans according to ESPN. That's their average. So not a full stadium. The Grizzlies have 60 days to void the stadium agreement or not. More than likely, they won't void it. But why do you want to talk about this story and address it? Because I do think it is interesting.
So, I wanted to address it because I wanted to ask you guys, as sports fans in Seattle, and I know as basketball fans and as Sonics fans, I've been going through this when I first heard the story again on Danny's show in the morning on 710. I was like, oh wow, like there's this Danny Gallant. And I was like, oh wow, there's this opportunity. Like this is such a ripe opportunity for Seattle to swoop in and take this team. But then I was sitting there and I was thinking, this feels way too much like the situation the Sonics had, like with having arena issues and money and yada yada yada. So my question is attendance. So my issue is, Shane and Robert, would you feel dirty if the city of Seattle did the same thing to another city to take their team, just like how we had a team taken?
So first off, the Kings a couple of years ago, was that also very similar or not?
It was, because they had to find a way to build a new arena or finance it.
I don't think this is going to happen because I honestly think Memphis as a specific team is a growing team that can definitely compete for a title, let's say 4 or 5 years from now. You have John Moran, of course, who will definitely win Rookie of the Year. Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark. It's a really young team. I think Memphis and the Grizzlies themselves expect that attendance will rise over the next few years. Let's be honest. This is one of the more entertaining teams, not only just to watch on NBA League Pass, but even on national TV. They had a few ESPN games here and there. Memphis knows, and the Grizzlies themselves know, that they are going to have better attendance numbers in the years to come as the team will inevitably get better. But it does beg the question about what is the pathway for the Sonics to get a team back. And I've also mentioned Vegas as another suitor. Look, the NFL is now in Vegas. The NHL is now in Vegas. It's inevitable that the NBA would love to get in that market, especially if it works well. Shane, what are your thoughts on this whole thing first before I let Brandon go?
Right.
I don't know. I would obviously love to see the Sonics back, of course, but like Robert said, there's this atmosphere growing in Memphis that I think the people around there are, starting to kind of buy in and be fans of this team, and in the end, I would be surprised if they ended up leaving. They could, and if they did, Seattle or Vegas would probably be their top destination, I'd imagine. I don't know. They have, 60 days to decide, you said?
Yes, 60 days.
Yeah.
30 to 60 around there, but I don't think they're going to do it. I think it'd be really strange, but
that's a team that's moved around a lot anyways.
Vancouver and then Memphis, yeah.
So I'll say this. I think speaking on your idea about Vegas, I don't think Vegas can Vegas is not. So, okay. So Vegas is a kind of an enigma, right? It is not what a lot of people think in terms of a town. It has so much going on in such a small area, and then everything else is just like outside of it, that a lot of what I've heard is not a lot of people believe that the city would want a third sports team, because I don't believe Vegas could hold 3 sports teams. They have hockey. That was great because they didn't have any sports teams. They're getting a football team. That'll be great. But I don't think they would want to try and have a basketball team and a hockey team competing against each other for eyeballs in a city like Vegas.
And also, don't forget, MMA and boxing is just always there too.
And so, yeah, at the end, before, just one last thing before you go, Shane.
That's fine. That's fine.
I'll say this: Memphis has moved around a lot, yes, and they do have their claws there, and they might have like this. Like, it might starting to be like an era of like, yeah, basketball in Memphis. But I will remind you, even in the last year where the Sonics sucked and they were terrible, there was still an argument to be made that there was one of the most passionate fan bases in the country in Seattle.
Well, I mean, that's Seattle, though. Seattle as a sports city.
But that's my point. That's my point. Like, if you're gonna choose between any other city, I mean, the NBA has no argument anymore for not bringing a team to Seattle the first chance they have.
Mm-hmm.
They know that Seattle draws numbers in any sports. I mean, Seattle is a big city. It's a medium-sized city, but in sports, it's a big city market.
No, it absolutely is. And that's always been my argument for years. But I think another thing with the NBA, too, is you look at the Thunder, and yes, they have been successful over their tenure in Oklahoma. That's a super small market. The thing it's a super small city that draws a super small market number. It's a college crowd.
Yeah.
It's not an NBA crowd. And that's part of the thing is I think the NBA realizes, well, yes, Oklahoma City's a good market to be in. It's not Seattle in terms of the market value that they have or the market share. I mean, it only added to the free agency worries and the free agency things about, oh, we're going to expand the money for players to stay with their own team. They only added that or added more money to that partially because of Oklahoma City, because of guys like Westbrook and even Paul George to a degree wanting them to stay around. It was a bit of a reaction to KD leaving, but I mean, Shane, go ahead with your thoughts on it.
Well, and that's part of the thing with Vegas too, because Vegas, it's a lot smaller than people think, because a lot of the traffic and the people there are tourists, and so the city itself is, I think, only like 500,000 people, which is not. I mean, it's not huge, but then. If you look at a city like Seattle, for instance, the city is medium size, but the surrounding area in the metro is giant. I mean, there's 4 million people in the Seattle metropolitan area. But Vegas, there's nothing around Vegas. The only thing around Vegas is Area 51. I mean, that's like, I mean, it's true. So, there's like a couple towns south of it, but other than that, I mean, you go north, there's some stuff, but then it's just kind of empty desert for miles and miles and miles. So I don't know.
Also, I'll say this: I don't think the Knights would be too happy, would want a basketball team coming in, considering for Vegas being so small, they average a 405 like rating on their games.
Yeah.
And they were 12th in the NHL last season. So
I think part of that is like the hype of them actually going to the Stanley Cup their first year. They weren't amazing the last couple of years, but the first year with the Stanley Cup year, that obviously added to the hype for the city as well. I think for Vegas, I think obviously those are the top two cities for the NBA. It's Seattle and Vegas, but I think the only way we know if Vegas works is how big the Raiders are going to get, because we know that the Knights are pretty big. But if the Raiders get pretty big, the NBA won't have a choice. And I think at some point they have to table a discussion, whether that will dilute the league or not. They have to table an honest discussion about, okay, can we get Seattle and Vegas in here as expansion teams?
Right, because whatever expansion they do, I mean, I'm not even, and like anybody listening to this is probably gonna be like, oh, you're just a homer, but I'm like, no, it's a fact. The next expansion that happens.
This is not a homer discussion. I mean, we're bringing in Vegas in this.
The next expansion that has to happen. I mean, yes, Vegas is great, but like it has to be Seattle. Like, I'm
even
sorry.
Players want it. That's another thing.
If it's not Seattle, people are gonna be like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah.
NBA, like, this is whack.
Yeah.